Welcome back to the Stronghold podcast. Really excited for this episode today. In studio, and I'll say in studio, it's kind of a pop-up studio. It looks pretty professional. Check it out online. Yeah, it looks professional.
Spot on.
Yeah. So that is my guest, Matt Ecklund. Welcome to the Stronghold.
Thanks for having me, Dave. What a pleasure to be here with you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've been excited for this one. So as you may have heard, I mentioned I like to kind of start off with an introduction of my guest. And so I'm going to go through a couple of things, factoids that I've gathered about you, hopefully save some for you to do a little bit of an introduction, and then we'll get rolling.
Sounds great.
So Matt is a husband to his high school sweetheart. And I may have gotten a source, not to reveal my source, to give me a little bit of details about you today.
Sure.
In the description of the high school sweetheart component of your relationship, I got on again, off again, and finally on again. Your family, I guess, knew that you would both end up together and that you needed to each do a little growing up. Mm-hmm. Matt is also a father of 4 kids, all living, I would say, their best life every time I see them.
I hope so.
So, yeah,
That's the prayer.
That is the prayer. So Matt is also co-founder of Ecru Acres Family Farm, founded in December of 2023. And the interesting thing about that, I think we've had a few laughs about, Matt, is that was December of 2023, so less than a year ago. Mm-hmm. And here's the animal count. I got current numbers. This could change day to day.
It very well could.
Yeah,
yes.
Right. I think this is fluid. So this is as of recording. In less than a year, Ecru Farms is up to 2 cows, 2 lamb, 6 goats, 84 chickens, 18 ducks, 5 rabbits, 3 dogs, 4 cats. And then I got 1 indoor. I'm guessing that's one of the cats. Is it?
We have 2 indoor cats.
Okay. See,
one of those 2 is indoor outdoor. So yeah.
Okay.
It's a zoo.
So yeah, it
or
is
a farm.
It is a zoo or a farm. You are a loafing shed builder.
Currently, yeah.
Okay. Vintage tractor owner, which check out Ecru Acres on Instagram. Really cool tractor. I like that.
Thank you.
Most importantly, that comes out of Ecru Farms for me is you are my duck egg supplier.
This is true. And I have to apologize. I forgot your duck eggs this morning.
That's all right.
But I'll get you.
I know where you live. I know, and you do delivery occasionally too, which I appreciate.
Truth.
Matt has ridden in all 5 years of the Fathers for Fatherless 100-mile bike ride. And you also contribute to the planning team alongside me, which has been a good way to get to know you and serve alongside you.
Heck yeah.
Matt is getting on board the Wild at Heart train and facilitating men's retreats and events, which we'll for sure get into.
Yeah.
You sing in the church worship team, and I've heard music is 100% your therapy. Mm-hmm. And then some random fun ones. And this might reveal the source here. I guess with your high school graduation, and after the men's retreat, this doesn't surprise me, you decided it would be funny to go naked under your gown to your high school graduation.
Truth.
I'm getting a head nod there. And then your faith in the Lord, and so, okay, to balance it with something very, very flattering from the source, your faith in the Lord has, quote, quite literally saved our family and continues to do so. Oh, wow. And then in your spare time, not to bury that one, because that's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
In your spare time, you are also a very talented project manager in the construction space.
Yeah, in spare time.
Yeah, just that whole career thing when you find time, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So welcome to the show, Matt. Go ahead. Anything I missed there? I felt like maybe I got too much, but I had some fun ones.
No, that was great. Wonderful introduction. Thank you for that. If I was to introduce myself, I would say, hello, everybody. My name is Matt Ecklund. And I'll start with I ams. I am a son. I am a husband. I'm a dad and a stepdad. I'm a construction professional. I'm a hobby farm enthusiast. And a child of God, which I think I started with as a son, and let's bookend it there. And there's a lot of cool, fun stuff happening in our life, but a lot of cool, fun battles that we wage every day. And I have to call them fun because if they're not fun, then it hurts, but also good stuff. So anyway, yeah, that's me. That's who I am. And yeah, there's many layers to this onion. So wherever we go, let's ride, man.
Yeah, no, it sounds good. And I know that there's people who listen to the show all across the country. So Matt and I are both, I guess I should confirm this. I never asked you. You're kind of native Minnesotan, right?
Yeah, I grew up in Buffalo, just
okay,
a little bit down the road from where we're sitting today.
Okay, yeah. So both of us predominantly in Minnesota, from Minnesota.
Yep.
So I don't know if you can pick that up in the accent. Hopefully not. We'll see.
I've been asked where I'm from over the years. A lot of people think, are you from the South? I'm like, oh.
Okay.
No,
that's good.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's maybe the farm living too is really picking up that accent for you. But, I guess maybe if we just jump into things, one just heartfelt appreciation that I want to share with you, and then maybe we can kind of jump into something you have going on right now.
Sure.
I mentioned in the introduction that you're kind of getting involved with the Wild at Heart. I said train because they have, if someone hasn't heard about it, John Eldridge published a book, Wild at Heart, many, many years ago. It's grown into, I think, I'm just going to say 5+ podcasts. It is daily devotions. It is men's retreats. It's women's retreats. It's spin-offs. It's opportunities to really explore your heart from a masculine perspective, and as I mentioned, from a feminine perspective, to grow an appreciation of how both those are distinct from each other, how they live and cohabitate together, and how there's similarities. And so the heartfelt appreciation for you, Matt, is the invite a few weeks back now to attend a Wild at Heart men's retreat in northern Minnesota. And I would say thank you so much. The experience it really probably changed the course of my life. I know that sounds pretty lofty to say that. But I think where I was before going up to that retreat was they kind of you hear that maybe the story of the ship 1 degree off, left on its own way, over the course of hundreds of miles can become very far off course. And I feel like I knew I was off course, but I didn't know how to navigate to the path that I needed to be on, the path that God would have me on. And I knew the right questions to ask going up. But to back up a little bit, you attended that men's retreat before we did, and then you felt the need to extend the invitation. So maybe you can talk a little bit about as you went up to that men's retreat for the first time. We talk a lot about on the podcast about truth and capability. And to understand what truth is, many times we have to create separation from our everyday life. It's just very busy. It's filled with noise. It's filled with things that matter, things that, quite frankly, don't matter, and everything in between. But the retreat, definitely provides a chance to get away from that. So maybe you could jump into that a little bit, and then what hit you with the experience. And why you felt the need to invite guys up and attend a second time.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so we were up end of September, rewind a little bit further, back into middle of May of this spring was when I attended, and I would say lofty description of changing the direction of your life, absolutely not. I hear that more often from folks that I talk to who've attended these retreats, and I have the same story. That I was in the right place, right? I think you were, as you described, you're kind of in the spot to receive. Like you have some question that you want to have answered, and then to get there and to unplug and spend time in solitude with God, and just the whole program of that retreat really offers itself to allow us to do that. And so I was in a place to receive, and my attendance was not planned in much advance. I was invited 2 weeks before the retreat by a mutual friend of ours, and I was in a spot in life that it was like, this is the next thing that God is putting in my path to save me and my family, is how I would describe it. And so, to experience the retreat, to be ready to receive, it changed the course of my life. There's no question. And I would, if we keep rewinding back, like, okay, why am I ready to receive? If I go all the way back to February 2023, I had what I have described as a suicidal cry for help. My wife would tell you a suicide attempt. I walked out onto a pond and approached open water and screaming up and down, swearing, yelling, begging God why. And there's a whole ball of web and yarn and rubber band to get to that point. But I was ready to be done. And praise God, he didn't take me. And I prayed a lot out there and found myself back inside. But one of the things that I was wrestling with in that season is shame and guilt and regret that masqueraded themselves as somewhat of this pompous, arrogant man, but really laden with anger and rage. And I was losing control of it. I didn't know how to outlet it. Like, physical endeavors were one of the things, right? So you mentioned the bike ride. That's a great outlet to, like, try to expunge some of that rage that's building up inside. But I never got to the root of it. And so I would take on tasks, whether it's work tasks or this physical task or serving tasks, taking on all of those things. But it was like I was treating the symptom. I was never getting to the root cause of the ailment. And so it was probably sometime in March I had a rageful explosion, and my wife very sternly, boldly, at the time I felt very attacked, but if in hindsight I'm like, that was the exact words I needed to hear. And she looked me in the eyes and, "You need help," is what she told me. And I was like, seeing red. She was like, "You need to get out of the house, go to work, just, you need to leave." And so I'm like, wow, okay. What do I do with all that? So I started going to therapy in March, I think. It was like weekly for probably 6 weeks. In that exploration, started talking about this idea of complex PTSD, and the condition of which my youth, growing up in a broken home and dealing with trauma and loss at an early age, how addiction to substance and work or women or porn or drugs, like any of those things, like how that played its role into where I was at that moment in February. And unpack that up through March. Josh invited me to attend Wild at Heart in May. Things were volatile, I would say at best, at home, with starting this hobby farm and taking a financial risk, but adding, I mean, you heard the animal count, adding all of that. It was just like, it was an eruption. But it was like, wow, there's something going on here. And in looking back on it, like, God showed up all the time. Every corner I turn, every time I look back, he's there. Every day I look for him now, he's there. And so I don't know. It's kind of a rambling response to how we get to Wild at Heart, but I was ready to receive in May, and dude, it changed my life. Like the restoration and the healing of the masculine soul and the masculine heart, and how we are created as men to lead and to live and to flourish in this life. I heard it in such a way that I had never heard before, and landed like an anvil on my head, like Wile E. Coyote. So
maybe we pause there. In a state of going to that retreat prior for the first time, being in a state to receive. A friend of mine's got a saying, and he puts on T-shirts and hats, and it says, "No one is coming to save you." And I had a problem too, because I'm like, well, Jesus is coming to save me. But what it really means and what it gets to, and you say it, another way to say it would be in a position to receive, is really to be saved or to help yourself. You have to make that decision to want to change or to receive help or to be in a state to receive. So I like how you put that. But maybe, we know each other, and I know your story. And I said, whatever you're comfortable with discussing, I think there's some worth in kind of going through. You covered a lot. You covered youth, and in the terms of the retreat, when we watched videos, we went through our wounds, and some wounds were self-inflicted. Many times self-inflicted wounds as we grow into teenagers, young adults are based on wounds that we received as children. And so maybe for listeners of this podcast, if you kind of want to maybe unpack that a little bit,
sure.
Nutshell highlights that really sets the stage of Matt goes up to this Wild at Heart retreat and is in a state to receive, because there's a lot of people that I believe could be at something as impactful as a retreat, a chance to separate themselves from their everyday and not be in that state and not see the benefit. But we're both saying we did. And so maybe set the stage of what got you to, as you're driving up, I'm in a state, I know I need to change. My primary customer, my wife, has given me direct feedback, and I'm ready.
Yeah. Oh, man. I think if we rewind, not all the way to the beginning of the story, but I think what put me in the spot to receive was vulnerability, transparency, carrying around the giant weight of shame and guilt and regret for all of the messed up things I had done in my past that I was going to the grave with, right? And so I got to the point where I realized, and I started listening to a podcast in March as well, the Wild Courage podcast. And Jeremy Morris started this thing with a group of his buddies. And the whole idea of this podcast is men sharing story, being vulnerable. Essentially, I think tagline is every man has a story and the world needs to hear it. And I would take that even further, say every person has a story and the world ought to hear it. If nothing for the ability to kind of cleanse the soul of some of the crap that we're carrying around. But I found that the more I share, the more people I talk to, like everybody has somewhat of a similar story. They find courage in other people sharing their stories. The Wild Courage folks talk about borrowing courage, right? Like, I could never tell somebody that. Well, okay, maybe you can't, but I had the courage to do it. Borrow some of my courage. You're welcome to it. Please borrow my courage, and maybe you might find some of that courage to share your own story. And so being ready to receive was on the front end of that, being vulnerable with my wife, sharing things with her that I knew was going to destroy her. When I started sharing, there was, I can picture the argument standing across the kitchen dining room with her hands in the air going, this is all a lie. Like everything we have, our relationship, this house, our family, it's all built on a lie. And she was right. And not that she didn't want what we have or that what we have isn't good. But she was right. Like I had kept so much from her and that in a facade of lying that like that's where I became this rageful, angry human. And so as I start to be vulnerable, now I'm ready to receive. So if we rewind all the way back a little bit into where does Matt come from and why is he so broken and why does he need saved? I want to start with, because I told this story before, and I think to pay homage and honor my parents to say that like they aren't the villains of who I am and why I do the things I do. Like they have their own stories that when I've asked the questions and I look back on the times we've spoken about it is like, like I can't imagine living that story. And so I have to acknowledge like mom and dad did the best they could with every tool they had available to them. And they were living their own story at the same time. That doesn't negate the fact that my experience has led me to feel the pain and the hurt and some of the things that I have. And so in a highlight fashion, I grew up in a broken home. My mom was married 4 times. I'm a product of marriage number 2. My dad remarried, and so I've got step siblings and half siblings. I think there's 8 or 9 of us in total. And so that was really hard growing up in broken homes and navigating step siblings and whatnot. I was introduced to sexual immorality at a very young age, seeing sexual acts like 5 years old probably, and then engaging in that around the same age with neighbors. And so that was like, I can recall that. And then again, divorce, mom meets my now stepdad. But the fracture of our family, and I think like the design of the evil one and how he came after the family unit. I was 12, my older brother was 16, and he was accidentally killed by a friend of his. And so that was like, if I think of the architecture of our family and where all the broken veins are in that vase, like that is the moment in time that like sent the pieces to the different corners of the universe that would be our family unit. And so that kind of set a path into confusion, insecurity, suicidal ideation, alcohol and marijuana use, promiscuity, and that was kind of the path from, I don't know, middle school through high school. That's why my wife explains the on again, off again. Like, that's part of it.
Right. Can I ask you a quick question about that? You know, as you're going through that, all of those experiences, you can go through life and maybe sometimes you have a steadying presence. Maybe that steadying presence is God or faith, or maybe it's a father who's a really strong presence. Maybe it's a mother who kind of watches over the family. Would you say that you were going through those experiences each individually in your family? Were you a close family? Did you kind of pull together as you experienced those traumas? Or did you feel like even at a young age you were living life pretty exposed to the elements?
Yeah, that's a good question. I haven't really thought of that. I feel like we did a fairly good job coming together and supporting each other. Growing up, we each had a sibling within a year of each other. And so I have a sister who's just under 11 months younger than I am. And we share mom and dad. We're the only two in the only family, or the whole family that, except for my twin brothers who are the youngest. But we share mom and dad. And so we were really close-knit growing up. So maybe we leaned on each other. But I don't think I ever really did deal with or process the grief and deal with the weight of losing a brother at that age. And then all the decisions that come on the heels of that. Man, I think I just released a significant portion of that on October 1st this month.
Right.
Because that would be the 23rd anniversary of my brother's death. And that was a wild day. But again, I very much feel like I'm in the mind space and the soul space to receive the healing that God has for me in all arenas in my life. That day, it just so happened to be the grief and the pain and the just all of the crap that's wrapped around that one, like I say, that fracture of our family.
And yeah, I mean, I ask that from the standpoint that I think that what makes your story in your experience, Matt, so relatable is there's not like there's not necessarily a villain in the story. There's not unless there's something I don't know about, there's not like the abusive stepdad, the alcoholic, that just beat you to feel better about himself, or what it is it's a collection of just the rawness of life. And that's why I asked, what the relationships were like during that time, because you were experiencing life and not the ideal, things too early, things that should not have been, experienced or came across your path as a child, accidents. But I think that's, if you ask people the question, how are you doing? A lot of people are going to say, I'm good and I'm fine. And it's, if you go a little bit below the surface, you start to hear those types of facts. And I think that we normalize that. But I just wanted to kind of set that stage a little bit. And thanks for going into detail on that. But I think that helps people relate with your story, where you're going. And when you're saying set the stage, why did it need, or, why was I in a state to go to the retreat and to receive change? And why did I need to change? I think that people look, well, I'm not so bad. Maybe my life isn't, compared to others, it's not as bad as it could be.
Right.
I think that helps provide some detail. So anything else kind of leading up to driving up to that retreat on Thursday?
Oh, man. No, I mean, yes, there's probably umpteen hours of conversation to be had, but yeah, it's, I was in the state. I knew something had to change. God was in his right place in my life, had been at work in our family for probably 6.5, 7 years since then. But yeah, I was ready to surrender it. I couldn't do it on my own anymore. I tried, man. I tried in my career. I'd tried in my family. I'd tried on myself. Like, I was kind of at the end of, I don't know what else I can do. And so let's let God lead. It's his turn.
Yeah, you actually set that up really well. That from a care standpoint, you were treating the symptoms. You were not approaching the cause, or and when you treat the symptoms, what do we hear so many times in the commercials? if you take this, don't quit taking this drug. Take this one to minimize the impact of the first one that you're taking, and then pretty soon you're 3 or 4 down the road. You're treating the symptoms. You're exposing yourself to all these new symptoms. You're masking and you're hiding. And I think that you said, here's what we can really get into the retreat is that not getting to the cause. When you start to get to the cause, you start to be vulnerable. And so some of those conversations happened, as you mentioned, with your wife. Her response is, all this is not real. All of it's a lie. So pre-retreat, I kind of just want to really set the stage because, people can relate with those uncomfortable situations. People can certainly relate with hiding their true selves. We hide our true selves, and we're setting the stage for this here, going up to retreat, is because we can't get space from those wounds. We're in them. We're exposed to them. We're in the process of hiding them. That takes effort. Anybody who's ever told a lie that starts to become revealed and told a bigger lie to cover up that one can understand that. And that's not just lies. That's wounds. That's life experience. That's trauma. We want to cover it up because we're not ready to be vulnerable. We're saying we're treating the symptoms because we're hiding things. As you started to do that pre-retreat, so obviously that's in the moment and it's very vivid. You can picture your wife's hands up. This is all a lie. Everything we got. Did that process with her and kind of not come back down, but did she start to process you being vulnerable over time? Or after you start to kind of unveil, hey, here's Matt being vulnerable. Yeah, because that's our biggest fear, right? Especially as men, especially the ones we love, our wives, our spouses, our kids. Like, how are they going to view us?
Right. Yeah, for me, when I got to the point of like, okay, I have to be honest. I have to like rip these Band-Aids off. I have to tell her. I felt like I was a few steps ahead of her in the, quote, grieving process of the conversations that we were having to say that, like, I'm ready to expose this to you. She didn't know what was coming. This is the first time she's hearing this. And so for her to respond with emotion like she did, I was ready for that. Maybe not to the extent of which that she did. But I was a few steps ahead of her. And then the hat that I put on and the perspective that I put on in sharing was that validation of her to say that, like, I wasn't going to defend myself, right? Like, I lied to you about sleeping with this one person because I knew at the time, had I did, it would be this giant fight. Well, here we are 10 years later, and we're speaking in code in front of the kids, and I answer the question, and she thought I was talking about something else, and now I've, like, exposed myself accidentally. And so she's right? Like, I lied. I caused pain and hurt, and I need to own that. And you're right. I hurt you, and I'm so sorry. And you have every reason to respond the way you do. You're right. There are many lies that have built us to this point, and I'm so sorry. And you're right. And then to work through but I'm not that guy anymore. That's not my job. My job is to show up as the guy that God's created me to be, that I'm learning to become, and allow him to work in her and on her and through her the same way he's doing in and through me. And so that's been the position when we get into these spots of vulnerability and the spots of transparency and these like hard conversations I have to have with my wife or other people that I have caused messes with. I lead with validation 100% of the time. And there is no room for an excuse or to defend myself. I made a colossal mistake and I can't take it back. And I'm so sorry for that. And your pain is 100% real. And that's been really hard to do, but has been so rewarding to hear my wife's words in the introduction, right? Like, I know exactly what she said about what God's doing in my heart and how that is repairing me, but also our family and what our legacy looks to be for the next however many years. Like, it's that position that's allowing that to happen, I think.
Yeah, she said, your faith in the Lord has, quote, quite literally saved our family and continues to do so. I think that continues to do so is interesting. I mean, we talk a lot doing the bike ride, Fathers for Fatherless, about fathers. And, on the retreat, we jumped in, to a little bit of our backgrounds with our fathers. And we were with, I think, 20 guys total around there. Mm-hmm. The stories that jumped from good, fine to my father's and the issues, they were right under the surface and they're prevalent. Mm-hmm. And that's where guys' vulnerability many times mm-hmm. lies. So I think you bring that up, that I'm glad you see that. I'm glad that she shared that about you, because the stakes are high. Mm. As you opened up kind of about your background, you said, my mom and my dad, they really did the best with what they were given. Mm-hmm. And I think that you can. I think that as a parent, you can do the best with what you are given, but still in leave behind, this trail of hurt mm-hmm. or wounds or injuries with your kids. But the great thing is, just as they are from injury or falling, and Matt's kids are no strangers to injury. I said they're living their best lives, and many times that includes stunts and mm-hmm. and bloody injuries mm-hmm. and farm life, and mm-hmm. it's beautiful. But just as they're resilient from bouncing back from that, if we lead a life of truth, if as fathers we choose to lead our families, if we mm-hmm. choose to expose ourselves and be vulnerable and not live lies and choose to and change that course, mm-hmm. they are resilient from a soul perspective mm-hmm. too. And I think that many men they'll minimize what they're going through. They'll continue to cover the lie. And I've even heard it. You hear about marriages that stay together just until the kids graduate.
Oh, yeah.
Because they want life to be, quote unquote, normal for their kids.
Yeah.
And it sounds insane, but that's relatable because mm-hmm. that's a hiding nature. You never had to become vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And I think you misunderstood how your kids absorb the environment you create. Mm. They don't, I think, absorb it through what you tell them. Like, mm-hmm. oh, I love mom. I'm together with mom. We're married. Mm-hmm. They see the actions. They see mm-hmm. the fights. They see the discussions. They're confused about the discussions mm-hmm. because they aren't congruent with a loving marriage, mm-hmm. and that damage is there. Mm-hmm. So, I would, again, heartfelt just thank you. Besides inviting me to the retreat, thank you for working on that. We in the podcast, the tagline is exploring capability and truth, and you have become, and I've mentioned to you this on the retreat, over the course of the years of getting to know you, seeing you grow as a father is extremely important to me. It's an emphasis that I've placed. It's since my oldest son was born and he is in the hospital, I gave him his first bath under the sink. The Lord spoke to me. He said, "You are a father now. This will be your mission." And to see other dads take that seriously, and taking it seriously, I think it can be if you lived a life of comfort and you just are very focused on being a father. But I think there's a lot of power impact when things didn't go smooth. As you became a father, you were hiding things. As you became a father, you had wounds that you needed to overcome. And so again, heartfelt, just sincere appreciation and love for you as a brother in Christ, that you took the time, you took the bold steps to change a course and provide that for your kids. We see that as friends of yours and your family. Your wife obviously sees that. So,
well, thank you.
Yeah, just wanted to.
Thanks so much.
Wanted to kind of add that. Definitely appreciate that about you, Matt. So,
yeah, and I think just thought popped in to think like at some point I've arrived, right? Like I've done the work, I've made it.
Yeah,
and the work is done. The work is done when I go home forever. And so that sounds maybe somewhat discouraging, but also I think it's the reality that like I make it every morning. Like I've made it today, but then like there's work to be done every day.
Yeah.
To say that like, well, at one point, when's it all gonna be gumdrops, rainbows? I don't know. There'll be glimmers of that through the days, through the years, but also like never.
Yeah.
Like unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, Sam used that too in that fold that continues to do so.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that thought hits it right on the head.
Yeah. It's a daily, man.
Yeah.
Take up your cross daily because we have to. I think we can't discount the fact that we live in a broken world and that the things that happen to us, me, you, my parents, our friends, like the traumas, the big T's and little T's that I'm inflicting on my own kids, right, is like we live in a broken world. And so if we believe that God is good and God is real and that eternal life is there, we have to believe that the devil is real and the evil spiritual realm is a real thing and that exists here on this planet of which we are living on. And that's like the parallel battle, I think, that I didn't give enough credit to. And I think I give a lot more. And I find a lot more comfort like in renunciation prayer and acknowledging that like the things that I do that I'm not super proud of don't come from God. Or the anger, the resentment, the thoughts of negativity and hatred and those sorts of things, like that's not coming from God. And quite frankly, that might not even be me, right? That's the evil one just placing the seed of doubt, placing the seed of can't and won't and don't and shouldn't and couldn't and wouldn't and all of that. Like that's all such bullshit, man.
Yeah.
And
it's identity, right? It's what we're attaching it to. That is fleeting. That's unsubstantial. It doesn't matter. It's damaging. It's the worst of us, and then we try to anchor to it.
Yeah.
So you said when you went up to the Wild at Heart retreat that you were in a spot to receive. So I think that when we talk about identity, what we attach ourselves to, that's getting into the content, right? So, so you're there. Like, what did you? Why did you go? Why did you come back and decide to invite friends, and not only invite friends, but then get involved with this mission of Wild at Heart? Like, what were you drawing? Because I think we're starting to cross over, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about wounds. We're talking about identity.
Yeah.
We're talking about the areas in life that we're, and I've mentioned on the podcast since, and it's a great way to look at things. The way that we're posers in life.
Yeah.
The way that we perceive ourselves or what we prop up is BS.
Yeah.
So maybe we jump in.
Yeah. So where do we go from here? Well, I think I believe fully in the fatherlessness epidemic and the impact that it's having on the family unit and on humanity as a whole. So what do we do with that? Right? That's a big mission that, how do we at an individual level get in that game? And so if I think of my involvement to the Fathers for the Fatherless, the first year it was about me. I wanted to do something hard. The second year it was about the community and the other men. The third year I wanted to quit because I didn't have the right equipment and my head wasn't in it. But fourth and fifth year, now it's like this almost a discipleship to say like, and I don't own this quote. I don't know exactly where I've heard it, but if we can get the man, we can get the family, and if we can get or save the family, we are making generational impact. And that's a legacy that lives far longer than you and I ever will. And so that's maybe the Fathers for the Fatherless seed that was planted to like start building this passion of, we got to save the dads. If we can save the dads, everything else falls in line. And so my experience at Wild at Heart was like, I left there on a total different path. Like the trajectory of my life was changed. And there was probably 25 or 30 guys up there in May. And I would venture to guess, if we went and talked to each and every one of them and the leaders, who I think then was their 7th, we went was their 8th, everybody says the same thing. My life once was, and it is now. I was going in one direction, and I'm 180, on fire. Like, I'm getting to know who I am, and I can lead well, and my life has changed for the better forever. Whether that's the unpacking of wounds or the renunciation of false identities or the encouragement of other men, whatever that might be, like, maybe it's not everybody that goes, and maybe more guys are in a spot to receive than are not. But it's almost unanimous that people are like, this has changed my life. And so I find it to be selfish and shameful and somewhat embarrassing not to share that with other people. Like, if I can experience this, if it can change me this way, I want to bring a chair to the table to play off of previous guests. Like, let's set the table, let's offer a chair, and the rest of it's up to God. But I've experienced this. Many other dudes that are in this environment are experiencing it. Globally, I think if you look at the numbers, it's like in the millions of impact that John Eldridge and his team have had. And so, like, if that's real, man, it's changing lives. The message that John has put together, and like, every man ought to experience it, whether he's ready or not. I think the more prep and the environment and the space of being ready to receive, the more you're going to take out of it, quite frankly. But, like, I think everybody should get a chance to go sit down and get weird with some dudes and be vulnerable and talk about their story, because it will change your life. Yeah. And that's where I'm like, I want to help offer this to more dudes, because I heard from the guys that were leading it, like, we only have the capacity to do it twice a year. Well, okay, so that's 40 guys a year.
Right.
How can we make that 80 guys?
Yeah.
And that's where I felt a passion to like, let's try to start facilitate this.
So again, we Matt and myself have both attended the men's retreat. So maybe provide a little color commentary. What it is
Sure.
is it's a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So Thursday, you head up in the evening. We specifically, they're all across the United States. If you go to Wild at Heart, you go to the Basics Retreat, you can find locations. I've looked, they're on the West Coast, they're on the East Coast, Central United States, all over the place. You go up Thursday, and you kind of, it sets the stage for, we're gonna watch some videos, we're gonna have some reflection, we're gonna have some good food, we're gonna have some fellowship, we're gonna be around other dudes that are up there and probably, as you put it, in a state or a spot to receive. Friday dives right in, and Friday, all day Saturday, and then about half a Sunday is I would say a progression of videos from John Eldredge. And so anybody who doesn't know John Eldredge, go out, buy or download the book Wild at Heart. It's a message that needs to be heard. If you're a man and if you put your hand on your chest over your heart and you feel a heartbeat, you need to understand that's the physical, but with your heart, there's also the spiritual. And you need to understand that in the same way. And unpacking that masculine heart is the point of all the videos that you watch over the day. But it is a progression. And I don't know about you. I described it as I felt like I went to counseling or therapy for about 4 days. I was tired when I got home.
Exhausted.
Mentally exhausted, spiritually, soulfully, and physically exhausted. So that's the experience. You said you went and you're like, how can we get this, if this can help 40, if this can help 60 across 2 weekends of this in Minnesota, how can I start to expand this? But what we just described, what both of us in tandem, color commentary and your experience started to, what stood out though? Because you said, I went there in a state to receive. So what was it that you received? Because we just put the stakes on the table. We said fatherlessness. And when you hear fatherlessness, if you're a dad out there, if you're a husband, if you're a soon-to-be father, if you're a new father, if you're a stepdad, if you're the male influence in a family, realize that fatherlessness is not the extreme. I mean, we help the extremes too through that bike ride. And so another thing too, a little backing up, the Fathers for Fatherless bike ride, we've each done it. I've done it 4 years. You've done it 5 years. We take it for granted. We train all summer long. End of August here in Minnesota, we complete a 100-mile bike ride. We raise some money internationally to help children across Thailand, Burma, India, China, in some of the most underserved areas of the world. We also help kind of a domestic or a partner here in the United States. Last couple of years, we've helped a teen mission called Legacy to Inspire. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about Fathers for Fatherless. I don't want to leave anybody out because we've experienced it and we've lived it. But that idea back again of fatherlessness, if you are in any of those roles, don't think that you're excluded from the term fatherless,
right?
Or playing a component in that. If you are home and you're the father, you can leave your family fatherless. You have to engage. And so to set the stage for how you came up, best of intentions, you serve this mission, you've had this idea of fatherlessness, but if you're hiding, if you're not revealing your true self, if you're not in love with your wife, if you're not synced up, we've said kids see that. Kids see how you act. They don't listen to your words. They see how you act and they imitate that. So you want to leave. That's a legacy, because I think about my son's 20 and 24. I'm starting to see it come to fruition now. And it provides a little affirmation in that the way they treat their mother, the way they treat their girlfriends, the way they treat people is loving and considerate and thoughtful. Well, they imitated that. because I'm many things, and many of them are not perfect, but I am an empathetic person. I love people. I'm relational, and I love my wife, and I want my boys, if nothing else, to be respectful, articulate young men. I'm starting to see that, but that was the task. That was the mission. And so as we jump into this and what you got, Matt, from being in a state to receive, as we kind of unpack that, what is it that you received? Because obviously it was powerful.
Yeah.
So what were those things that jumped out? I want men to focus on this because this is the challenge. It is not, presence is important. If you're in the home, that's I will say, even as a parent, if you're not present, how can you possibly hope to be the parent that you aspire to be? How can you possibly hope to be there for the conversations that need to be had?
Yeah.
How do you possibly hope to step in front of what your family needs you to step in front of? Okay, so that's price of admission. That's accepting the call.
Yeah.
Now you went up, state to receive. We laid out the playing field.
Yeah.
What did you receive?
I received freedom from the narrative that I would say the evil realm of this life and this world had imprinted into my identity. I received freedom from, like, I am, and I'm a rageful man. I am an addict to alcohol, marijuana, pornography, all of these things. I am not good enough. I am, or I won't ever be. And the biggest, like, the aha for me, we do an exercise up there, kind of the new name exercise, the burning of the yellow passports, and kind of identifying all the lies that I have believed about myself, the agreements that I had made with the evil realm of this world that had captured my soul. I received a lot of freedom from that, and went through the yellow passport and wrote, I don't know, probably 50 different lies that I had believed in myself and burned that. And it felt good, but I went to bed that night super uneasy. And the problem that just like kept ringing, like it was so loud, like, you're the problem. And so that next morning, well, that evening, I had a conversation with a couple guys and left that. We like kind of had a conflict at Wild at Heart as I was kind of explaining the story and the time of life I was at. And even from my brothers at the same event, I got this like, well, you're the problem. And it pissed me off. Even in that space.
It's just what you want to hear when you're being vulnerable.
Yeah, right.
Confirming,
it's like,
I am the problem.
Like, F you guys, man. Like, I thought we were in a different spot here. And so I went to bed that night like, I'm the problem. And the next morning, I went back to the bins in the supplies of the Wild at Heart, and I found that yellow tablet, and I wrote the problem on that sheet as big as I could on 8.5 by 11. And I'm like, I am not that. Yeah. I don't identify with that. I renounce the idea that I'm the problem. That,
Oh, that's right. We said this was real life, so.
I thought the do not disturb would shut that down. Sorry, man.
No problem.
But that's what I got out of that. Like that, when I look back at my experience in May, I found I received rescue from the idea that all of the bad that's happening around me is all my fault. I am the problem. And that the world would be better off without the problem. My wife and kids would have a better life without the problem. That's where I was in February, right? I'm the problem. I know how to do this. Like, I'm a problem solver.
Yeah.
Professionally,
right.
I would boil a lot of what I do down to risk management. And so, like, well, the risk is there's more issues. I've identified the problem. Let's eradicate the problem, and the issues go away.
Yeah.
That's a lie. That's BS in the sense that, like, I am the problem. No. Like, I'm contributing to and I'm subject to the temptations of the world around me, but that doesn't make me the problem. And there is hope outside of it. And that's what I received in May was like, wait a second, time out. I'm not the problem. My identity is not wrapped up in the mistakes that I've made or the things that have been done to me that I can't control or the mistakes that I have yet to make that I know I'm going to have to go clean up, but be humble enough to approach that with repair and love and humility to be like, I've messed up again. But that doesn't make me the problem. I don't have to identify with being the problem any longer. And that was like, whew, wow. Like there is freedom from this. And that I am subject to the temptations of this world. And that with partnership with God, I can resist them, but I'm not going to be perfect. And so, yeah, that I think is what I received out of my experience in May was, one, I met some other awesome brothers in Christ who I can lean on when the going gets tough, because it does. But also, like, affirmation that I am not the problem.
So let me ask you a question. Sans retreat, sans wild at heart, say they never existed. We talked about early on what that retreat did was it created space.
Yeah.
It removed it. I like how you said I was the problem. You're the common denominator, right? Mm-hmm. I think what you did was you removed that denominator. You took it to some place that didn't have any of the other components to that equation.
Yeah.
And you explored that denominator. Mm-hmm. You explored yourself a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
But you had to. Let me just ask you, like, do you think that you realized and came to a resolution, or that you would have come to a resolution that you identified as a problem, progressed beyond that to realize that you are not the problem, that life is messy, that everything that you had come to that conclusion with is a component of life being messy, and guess what? It's going to continue to be messy. Do you think you come to that conclusion without creating that space, which took the form of a retreat over a couple of days? If life, I mean, you're 100, I'm just going to ballpark 100 plus animals.
Yeah.
You are a project manager in construction. You are making the bills. Your kids are starting new schools. You're trying to make your marriage work. You're trying to uncover what you've been hiding and be vulnerable. Yeah. Manage people's as best as possible, or maybe not manage people's reactions to that. Who have I told what? You know, where am I going? Serving at church. You know, making the house payments, making the bills. I don't know. Like, do you think you, without being intentional, saying the stakes are high. This is my marriage. This is my high school sweetheart. On again, off again, on again. I want to keep it on again. Yeah. Been through that hurt. Yeah. Feel like we grew past that. Feel like we are better people. We know we're stronger together now. I don't want to lose that. Obviously, 4 kids running around. Your wife said they think, I forgot how she put it, but I think she put it something like, they think you hang the moon at night. You know, they look up to dad. You don't want to let them down. Yeah. You've got, the stakes are as high as they get. Yeah. Do you think you get there without having space and removing yourself from all of that?
No, I don't. I think without the retreat, I feel like the retreat was a catalyst in the space I was in. And I think it was like the next card in the deck to be played after becoming vulnerable with my wife, after starting therapy, and then the next card God placed in the deck was this Wild at Heart retreat as the catalyst to accelerate restoration and repair. So without the retreat, could we be here today? No. Could we be here in a year? Could we be here in 5 years or 10 years? Could it be 20? That I don't know. What I do know is that before the retreat, divorce was a word used in our house,
Right.
in the midst of conflict regularly. We haven't said that in, I don't know, 7, 8 months. Like that.
That's awesome.
That doesn't even come in. And I think that's like just kind of, you get to the point in the conflict if you throw your hands up and you're like, I don't know what else to do, so we may as well just get divorced. Like, clearly we're each other's problem, or I'm the problem,
Yeah.
right? Like, and so we don't talk like that anymore. And some of it is like, me coming clean to my wife with a porn addiction. Like, I'm 8, 9. I don't count the days on these like sobriety things or porn free, because it's like, I've recently heard people acknowledge like, well, that means then it has some hold on me. And no, it has no hold on me. I'm not going to count the days from which I was relieved from the grip of that, because it does no longer have the power over me. So that's, I don't know, 8, 9 months.
Well, yeah, no, I like that. And just to, I guess, affirm that from my view, I think there's camps, and people's healing is people's healing. Mm-hmm. If you need to carry a coin around and go to meetings and talk about your old life and how you don't want to go back there, and that's the way that you heal from that, that's the way you prevent relapse. I shouldn't say this. I guess in some ways, maybe I have an addictive personality, but I dealt with a lot of addiction growing up from my family. So I saw it firsthand, like the worst of everything. And I think that just basically drove home of, okay, when I start to become a little bit addictive about something, I withdraw. But however people heal from that is how they heal.
Yeah.
But I like that, because I've heard that too. It must have a hold on you. And I would challenge back on that to say, I think if you keep identifying as I am an addict and this is ongoing, then that's got a hold on you. That label,
I think so,
of addict, if you carry that with you, that is who you are, or that's what you're saying. And you're not saying, you're not figuratively burning that yellow passport of that title. You were the problem.
Yeah.
So if you continue to say, well, I am the problem, but I'm better now, and I don't want to become the problem again, you continually bring that up, and you bring that into the playing field. And words matter. We've already talked about the ways and the BS things we identify with personally in life. Yeah. So I just want to affirm that. Like, and again, I'm not counselor. I'm not. Right. I'm only just. I got a few podcast mics, and so I am a little bit. I have to know a little bit of everything, right? Right. I'm just joking. I'm just a podcaster and dad and all the other stuff. But no, I respect that in you, in seeing that, and
I've never done a 12-step program. I don't even know any one of the steps, other than I've learned from one of the brothers that was at Wild at Heart, who's in the midst of his 12-step program, and I think he completed one of the steps while we were up there. Yeah. And what I would say is that there's good structure in a program like that to help the human condition navigate repair and restoration and redemption. Yeah. And I think a lot of the journey that I've been on a solo mission, if you will, with partnership with my church and my brothers and my wife and whatnot, I think is somewhat in the same vein of what that path would be. And I don't know if it's capacity, if it's buy-in, if it's the desire to engage in a community like that. I don't know what it is that keeps me in one place or not the other, but I think the intent is somewhat of the same journey. Just at different paces or different settings. So, like you said, if it works for people, great. If it if you take some of it and apply it in different ways, even better. I don't think the shoe doesn't fit every individual.
Yeah, and that's an important to point out. And yeah, I guess I should back up a little bit there, because in the same vein that I would say, and not saying one is better than the other.
Yeah.
And as we talk about this retreat too, I don't want to say that a Wild at Heart retreat is the only vessel that you can become vulnerable at, that you can kind of remove yourself from your day to day and find healing.
Yeah.
Just as a 12-step program is not the same as a personal journey of healing.
Right.
But they are both intentional steps towards healing.
Yeah.
And so why I asked, like, if you could you foresee yourself navigating through this in the midst of everything? Or do you feel like that space created the opportunity to heal? I think collectively we both agree, space from maybe the things that are causing the wounds, or the things that are causing us to hide the wounds, is a good step towards healing. So that can be, a previous guest, Tim, talked about, he took his mountain bike and his Bible and he just went off on his own for 2 days.
Yeah.
What did that entail? That got him space from the day to day, and it gave him a chance to provide it self-reflection and quiet from the storm. That's what I'm trying to impress here.
I think that's exactly what anyone needs in the storm, right? Like, but I think it's designed that way. We even look at the life of Jesus, and when the onslaught of evil was attacking him, he went off on his own into solitude, out into the wilderness, and prayed. And that's not to say like, oh, we're all like Jesus. Well, we kind of are. I mean, we're made in his image, right? And so,
that's right.
Yes, I think, or maybe no, to say that, like, if not the time and the space that the retreat offered, would I be on the path I am today? Would I have had the enlightenment, that encounter that I had in May? I don't think so. I don't think so.
So that was pretty powerful. And for those listening, Matt mentioned writing on a yellow piece of paper. So it's called the yellow passport. It's kind of, it's a little bit of a ceremony where you write the names that your wounds in life have created, and you burn it, and you set that aside. The other part of that is getting out a white piece of paper and writing down the names that the Lord impressed upon your heart, the names that he would call you, not the wounds, not the relationships, not the BS that we've attached our identity to in the past, the name that the Lord would have for us. And to put you on the spot, I don't know, because some guys came up with one, some guys were, hey, I'm still processing. Was there anything that you wrote your first retreat on that white piece of paper that the Lord was calling you?
Oh, man. I have it in my car. I wish I'd have brought it in.
All right. So I put you on the spot. Is it maybe the second time?
Yeah. So there's probably a dozen or more names the first time around. Things like saved and Son of God and worthy.
You don't need to remember
those sorts of things.
12. Like
and then the second time around, it was bold, brave, confident, humble, caring, kind, those sorts of things.
That's awesome.
Yeah, those were the new names that I took away the second time.
Yeah, because you said something even there, though. It's not that we're like Jesus. And one thing that we learned on the retreat, and I've shared it with friends too, is that idea of image bearers. We are the image bearers of an almighty God.
Yeah.
And I don't know. When we talk about the Bible being the living word, and who we are as people, we receive that word differently. That's what makes it living. The how we come to it, things are going to jump out. Things are going to have meaning. Things are going to hit our hearts that maybe we would have read months ago, years ago, and we would have glossed right over. But in that moment, it's on fire. It hits our hearts. It impresses upon us. And those words, bold and brave, and it almost there's a mistake, I think, from again, in the podcast we talk about capability, and even the manner that we express our capability, we get words thrown at us like prideful or boastful, and I would push back on that, and I would say that for me, it's because I know I am made in. The word that I wrote on that white piece of paper was king. And I joked with Jenny, who had been on the show, that, oh, good, Dave, you think you're a king. Like, oh, yeah, you're so great. But really, it was embracing that responsibility of king.
Right.
And I've always had that in mind. Like I said, when I became a father and I gave my son first bath under the sink at the hospital, the Lord impressed upon my mind, my heart, and my soul, you are a father now. This is your mission. This is what I have for you. A high stakes, the stakes that we've been talking about, that is the common vein in all this conversation, Matt. And so it was writing king down and being comfortable with that. Because it's the same way that I find myself in positions of leadership a lot through life circumstance and talk about a lot. I really focus on, if you're waiting around for somebody to do something and you're wondering who's going to do it, a lot of the time it's going to be you, and even if that finds you quote unquote inexperienced or unqualified, what I've found is if you take action and you have good intentions, you can lead. Yeah. But you also, like in what Sam wrote about you, continue to do so. It's a progression. It's ongoing. It's reps every day. Yeah. And I think you even talked about a little bit whether that's depressing or not, whether saying, being saved and finding our purpose in life and being on a better path, we never arrive, and what I would say now as 48-year-old Dave versus maybe 28-year-old Dave, 18-year-old Dave, is that that's exactly where I want to be in life. I want to be pushed daily because the responsibility is to elevate my capability, to elevate my mindset, to elevate my soul, to live up to that image of the King of Kings. We are that image. We are the image bearers. Yeah. And so when I wrote down king, it was instantaneous in that thought process. The Lord laid that out. And what that does on a daily basis is I don't want to be the tyrant. I don't want to be the bad king. I want to be the king that people say, he cares. He looks out for us. He shelters us. He steps in front of hurt. He steps in front of damage. He takes on that to the detriment of himself. And then behind the scenes, I have to figure out how to replenish and what to plug in and who to be around, to charge back up and to be able to handle that on a daily basis. But that's awesome. Like the whole point, like when you talked about covering up the symptoms, and when you're covering up symptoms, you continue to be sick, right? And many times, if you cover up symptoms, you become more sick. You become more ill. And I don't know if anybody's ever had the flu or been sick or gone through a cancer diagnosis and treatment and then become healthy. The appreciation and the value that you attach to health is at another level. And then I think that many people take that really seriously. And maybe we get into that a little bit because you went up and you addressed, to maybe a bad term, the problem. Because you said you were the problem. And you realized that no, it was the wounds, it was the life experience, it was things that you were attaching your identity to that were BS. You went to the retreat. You came to that realization. You start to truly heal. You found health. So I think, just like I said, you start to take that health, that spiritual health, seriously. You invite it more guys to come up, and maybe we jump into that. Like, what was the second experience like, or what, or why did you do that, or kind of maybe where with Wild at Heart do you hope to take that mission?
Yeah. So in the vein of health, I'm not an overly super active individual unless I'm training for a bike ride,
Right.
or working on the hobby farm, which I think
That counts.
selfishly I'm checking that activity box.
Manual labor counts.
Yeah, like I'm getting
we all imitate it otherwise. Yeah.
I'm getting my steps in. So yes, active in that regard. But one of the health things that became apparent as I came home from the first retreat, and how anger and rage would expose itself. I had a lot of conversations with my wife. I was like, I think God's telling me that I should stop drinking. And I'm like, I don't know if I could do that. That's really kind of funny. But it went on, I don't know, that was in May, right? So for the next 3 or 4 weeks, Sam and I continually had this conversation while I'm having a beer or 2 or 6.
Yeah.
It's like, I think I should stop drinking. Like, I've identified this irritability inside of myself when I've drank that, like, I'm angry and this rage monster comes out. So after, I don't know, a handful of weeks, it's like, I think I should stop. And resisted it for a while.
Right.
And as God would have it, it was a random Wednesday. I was like, okay, today's the day. And so that's where, like, in the health vein, I started to take back some ground in my health, because previously, I think you observed it and a lot of other people observed it as we bought our hobby farm. I think I dropped like 30 pounds. And everyone's like, are you okay? Everyone was super concerned.
Yeah, I love that. When you drop weight, everybody's like, are you okay?
Yeah.
But like if you put on like 30 pounds, they'd be, quiet as a church mouse.
Yeah,
They
right.
never would bring that up. Like, Matt, you're looking kind of heavy.
Yeah.
They wouldn't mention that.
Yep. And of course, in the time, in hindsight now, I'm posing the whole time. Yeah, I'm so good, right? Like, we're just working hard on the farm. We're burning the candle at both ends. A farm, but we bought a project house too. So we're remodeling and stuff along the way. And I look back on it and I'm like, well, how did I lose 30 pounds? I'm like, well, didn't sleep a whole lot, drank way too much, didn't eat hardly enough, and add stress and pressure and anxiety and depression on top of it. And like, oh, that was my weight loss plan.
You too can lose 30 pounds.
Yeah. Join me on the pond, right? No, don't join me on the pond. That's not a healthy weight loss plan. Yeah. And yet when people would ask, like, we started off with this, how are you doing? Oh, we're good, man. Life's so good. When I'm existing on bush light and winks of sleep, like, what a lie. Anyways, so random Wednesday, quit drinking. And now it's been 4 months. Ironically, or not ironically, as God would have it, I quit drinking on my mom's birthday, which there's a parent wound parallel in this that I haven't fully explored yet. But so reclaim health, that's been huge. So mental health starts in February, physical health kind of along the way, but starting to eliminate some of these not so good things for my physical body, which is impacting my mental body. And then that moves into like, well, where does this mission go? What is my purpose? And dude, the clarity that's starting to come, being alcohol free now for 4 months, like I explained it to someone recently that I feel like the wires of my brain are being uncrossed and reconnected to the spots where they're supposed to be. And I'm starting to gain clarity on my purpose in this life. First as a son, and then as a husband, and then as a spouse or as a father, but then like in the mission of fatherlessness and like the passion I have for that. And so where do we go with that? I think is maybe the next question. Like, what does the outlook look like for Matt's involvement in the Wild at Heart camp of offerings to the masculine soul? I don't fully know yet. The original intent was to partner with the guys up in Effie and try to host a retreat up there on an off weekend, which is still totally a possibility. Time of year in Minnesota is a little bit problematic in that I'd love to do one, soon, but it's going to be really cold. And so how do we get people comfortable? How do we have running water? How do we cook? Like the logistics of it all get a little bit harder in the winter. And so I think I'm thinking, at some point here soon to start the conversation with some brothers on what does spring time frame look like? And if it's in Effie, great. Let's organize that with those boys. If it's local, at my place or at somebody else in the area who's got some property, that's a total possibility. Is it abroad out west? I think we've started to talk about maybe a national opportunity with some folks that have resources that could host. And then even just like a couple nights ago, I'm like, well, what if we found an Airbnb with some property and got some wall tents and some wood stoves and kind of rough this Wild at Heart? I don't know. That'd be kind of cool too.
Yeah.
So where does it all go? I think there's a springtime retreat as a facilitator in my future. And I want it to be spring 25. I'd love to try to maybe pull one off over the winter, but again, the logistics of that seems a little bit tough. And then one of the things that keeps popping up in my mind is how do we create the space to unplug, right? One of the beautiful things about Effie is there's not much for cell service there.
All right.
And so you're forced to unplug.
Yeah.
And the temptation of being at my house is well, we have 5G towers within shooting distance.
Yeah. Well, I'll say I did not realize, even living, we're 30 miles northwest of the metro. You're just a little bit farther out. The light pollution. I saw every star in the sky for 4 days up in northern Minnesota, and then the noise pollution. Yeah. If there was a car, you could hear it coming about 5 miles away. Yeah. And even then, it was pretty quiet. But just the road noise and the light pollution is a component of that. But we, as we're getting into this, I kind of love this because I know that I would hope I'm one of the brothers that you talk about because I'm very driven, and maybe we get into that, maybe we don't. But about recreating this experience. But I think you got into something as you're talking about it. I just believe with the good intent, not knowing is okay. Yeah. It doesn't stress me out. And if you look at another thing about building, so this would be building community, a place of healing, a place for God to come into and work. Yeah. And, through leading the men's coffee group at our church, the big thing that the Lord impressed on my heart is it's 0% about you, Dave. Mm-hmm. You're creating a space. Community is about creating a space for discussion, for fellowship, for conversation, for everything we don't get in the rat race of the world that we participate in. Mm-hmm. It's creating a space, as we've called, maybe a microcosm of space for an hour or two. But if you look at the Wild at Heart retreat, if you heard Matt and I talk about everything we did and everything we enjoyed, I'm not short selling the leadership, but quote unquote, the leadership really just made the space. Mm-hmm. They made some food. The food was amazing. Every meal was, I ate more up there than I think I've eaten for the month before I went up. The 4 days that I was up there, I ate more. But they played some videos and then they got out of the way and they let the process of God come into that space and work on hearts, work on the masculine heart, help men identify what that is and heal. Mm-hmm. But the leadership, I just want people to hear that because I think we think I said it myself. Like sometimes when you look around and you wonder who's going to lead this or who's going to do this, I would say usually if you have that thought, it's you, and you're going to be the leader. And then I also said a lot of times when I step into that, I feel unqualified. I don't know what I'm doing. How can I be the leader? When you have good intent, not knowing, I believe it's okay.
It's okay.
It's okay. And good intent, I think when you rely on a higher power, I'll say through exploring capability and truth. Many of these conversations that if people have sat down on the episode so far, go back to God. For me, as a son of Christ and following God, my truth goes back to him. I've explored truth. So if you're exploring truth and that is sans God, without God in the equation, but you are intentionally taking like the esoteric approach to seek truth, good on you. And you seek and you find community and others who are speaking what you believe is truth, and you follow that to the ends. I believe that that's a worthwhile pursuit with God or without God. Where what I'm saying is, for me, that seeking, like we said, continue to do so. Don't rest on, you haven't arrived. You're not the best husband ever. You're not the best dad ever. That is your mission. You take up that mantle. You continue to work on it. You seek it. If you seek truth, continue to do so. I'm just saying, as I was seeking truth, I arrived at God, and I haven't come to the end of that truth yet. In fact, it's affirmed things I see in people that are not followers of God, things that they do, relationships that they value, responsibilities that they hold close to their heart. They would speak of their heart. They would speak of their soul. They would speak of how it impacts their mind apart from God. You kind of feel like sometimes like, yeah, that's God, but it is what it is. Continue to seek that. But so you're doing that now. You're kind of building out what this might be in your mind.
Yeah.
The retreat that we went up, you were a leader, and you're exploring what that means to be in that space. So anything else on that Wild at Heart mission, or it's kind of TBD? Putting it together.
Yeah.
Looking
I would
for
say
others.
it's TBD. We're in I'm in, not we. I haven't. So yes, Dave, you're one of the brothers to help on this mission, because I won't be able to pull this off alone. But yeah, TBD. There's more conversations to be had, dates to be set, locations to be affirmed, the logistics side of it. But I think that's a good reminder, and I appreciate the perspective to say that the leadership then was very intentional to create the space and press play and offer community and let God work.
Yeah, a couple times we were up there with the leadership. Are you guys going to come talk to us, or are you going to tell us what to do? And no, it was like they set, and it was great leadership. Again, not discounting, is exactly what was needed in the scenario. They didn't try to take it over. They didn't try to make it about them.
It's not, I think, and I've never been to another men's retreat, but I've heard it said this isn't just another men's retreat, right? There's not a itinerary, there's not a schedule, there's not group time. We sit down in a circle and force everybody to be vulnerable and tell us your deepest, darkest secrets and that sort of thing. Like, it's very much free will. It's an open, safe space. So Friday there's 5 hours of free time. Saturday there's 5 hours of free time. And so it's like, there's some quote unquote like therapy or schooling sessions in the movies or the videos that we're watching, and the quiet time with God and the questions that are prompting some great repair that's happening in men. But you're right, the leaders aren't like, everybody here, except we start on time, right? So like, let's start. We got to keep schedule, but
respectful.
Beyond that, like, everyone's on a journey, and it's not with us as leaders. That's not our job. Our job is to offer the space and invite God in, and the rest of it's up to him and those who are there attending to receive.
To receive, to be in a spot or a state to receive.
Yeah.
I want to ask, like, what else is going on? What else is going on in your mind? Because I didn't know this about you, but it kind of makes sense. Sometimes we spy each other, sometimes we don't. Your wife said you're very analytical about things, that you like deep conversations. I guess I knew that because every time we talk, it turns into a great conversation. But one thing I want to point out, as we were talking, it became very relevant, and I think it's important for people to see and probably hear from what you've shared in your story, Matt. We're talking December 2023. Mm-hmm. You move outside the city. You're going to take your kids mid-school year to new schools. Mm-hmm. You buy a farm. You end up with, I'm just going to again ballpark 100 plus animals. It's fluid. And how many are in the house right now? Matt doesn't even know. There could be more than one animal in the house right now. You go through February of, and just from a friend's perspective, hearing about what you went through in February and being on the ice and being in the position you were, I'll say this: I apologize for not seeing that. Like, I did not see that. I also give myself grace, because those are things people hold tight, right? Mm-hmm. You weren't going around and advertising it. Guess what I'm going to do, or guess where I'm at. Yeah. And we talked about that. You were covering the symptoms. You were hiding things, and some things that your wife even said, like, I did not see this coming. Yeah. So you give a little grief there. But again, December 2023, February 2024, you start to unpack things. Mm-hmm. May, you're up at a retreat. It changes the course of your life. Same words I would use, and thank you again for the invite. You take part in this mission. You're adding more animals. You're living life. You're trying to change. I love that term. You're continuing to do so. Mm-hmm. You know the path. The path is continuing to reveal itself. You're continuing to do so. But we're sitting in October now, so roughly 10 months. Mm-hmm. Look how much life can change.
Oh, dude.
If you decide to take intentional actions, if you decide to seek change, if you decide to put, if maybe not intentionally, but you put the wrong things in front of your life, life can go that way too. We could be having a different conversation.
Or no conversation at all.
Or no conversation at all. And I'm not giving myself grace because my brother in Christ isn't here anymore.
Right.
And that would have been... So don't do that. Like, please, bookend that and have that never be a thought again. Yeah. Facetiously, but really seriously. Yeah, I mean, we talked about that too on the retreat. I came up to you and I said, not in the words that your wife put it, where your kids think that you hang the moon, Matt, but your mission is to be husband, to be loving father, to grow this farm, to provide your kids with that lifestyle that is going to create a legacy that carries on in your family. That is going to make an impression of positive experience and memories and things that they'll come back to you. My son's being 20 and 24 right now. They come back home. They want to be home. When they're home, we had a great summer of movies and game nights and meals together. And I would wish that for anyone because that was restorative. I said, Matt, you have this mission, and I am so proud of where you're going with it. But I just, for the people listening to the podcast, just realize that if you set an intentional course, if you find people who are saying healthy things and attaching the right words, and bold and brave and loving, and they are full of empathy, and you attach to them, and you go that direction towards that path. Just realize how quickly things can change. Yeah. And in the midst of that, there's a lot of a day can seem like a really long time.
Oh yeah.
I'm not discounting that to say 10 months was just 10 months.
Right.
But at the same time, it's the small steps. It's the right direction. It's being intentional and look in 10 months where things can be.
Yeah.
So that being said, Wild at Heart, I think maybe we should get maybe a little like a discount code or something for our next retreat. But no, it's a mission worth putting out there.
Oh yeah.
But other than if we set Wild at Heart aside, what's going on? Like, is the farm growing, or what's other missions, or your anything exciting coming up? In the marriage, like plans or
so in the same kind of ministry realm, maybe not ministry, but like the idea of like getting men together. I host a Wild Courage fire at my house on a monthly basis. I try to, and so it started with our small group, the dads of our small group. But it's very much in the same vein of like, let's get dudes together to get vulnerable and try to repair. So that's like, if Wild at Heart is like 4 days, not ready for that, not in that place, like this once a month fire for an hour and a half, that's a small barrier to entry to an environment that is very similar. So that's another thing that I got going on. What's big in the marriage and family side of things right now? My wife has been a full-time stay-at-home mom for going on 6 years now. When we went from 2 to 3 kids and we started doing the math, it was another mortgage for daycare. So Sam's been she's been a stay-at-home mom for going on 6 years, and so that's a blessing, but also a curse for any of the stay-at-home moms that are out there listening. Like, you guys have the hardest job on the planet. No doubt. Like, most rewarding maybe from a family perspective, but your clients are the most selfish, ungrateful, needy clients to ever exist, right? I don't know when the last time I've heard my kids thank my wife for any one of the umpteen things that she does to keep the house and the family rolling along. Like, thanks, Mom, for shopping, thanks for cooking, thanks for cleaning, thanks for getting my stuff ready to go, thanks for keeping me organized, getting me to this practice on time. Like, they just don't have the vocabulary yet. And so, selfless plug, also a grateful plug for all the stay-at-home moms, because that is a job that you don't get paid for, and it's opportunity cost if you try to put a number to it. But boy, that's a rewarding but a really tough job. So what's next in that? So Ezra, our youngest, he's in preschool now 3 days a week, and so I'm super excited about like this next season for my wife and like regaining identity and rediscovering purpose, and like being there to support her on like the hobby farm. She's the catalyst of it. That's her dream. That's her purpose. That's her fulfillment.
I didn't know that. I thought that was...
Oh yeah, that's. I mean,
thought that was your idea.
I mean, I might be somewhat on like the bird side of things. I might be responsible for the quantity of chickens that we've accumulated.
84.
Yeah, there's a few.
That's a lot of chickens.
And that's been kind of fun. But like, she's always wanted a farm, and she loves the farm, and she finds a lot of therapy in caring for the farm and dealing with the animals and whatnot. And so that's super cool to see her kind of blossom in that environment. But we started talking about like what's next for her. We had this conversation the other night about veterinary school. Like, she loves animals and caring for animals. And it's like, so let's take a look at like, what does it mean to get into animal care, whether that's a full-blown vet or somewhere in between. And we dig into it. It's like, 8 years of schooling. It's like becoming a doctor. It's the same exact thing.
It's an animal doctor.
Yeah. So that's a fun conversation to have. A very intimidating, if you will. But that might be next. I don't know. Or is it goods and services off the farm. I don't know what that looks like, but we're in that season with Sam, being able to kind of write an end to the chapter of stay-at-home mom and start writing the next chapter of what God's got on his agenda for us and for her. So that's super exciting. Helping kids navigate transition from elementary school to middle school and middle school into high school and academia and organizational skills and learning and whatnot. We're in that season as parents, helping our kids along the way, getting them engaged in activities. Winter just started, so our third son, our second son, our third child, Maverick, started hockey again this season, so we're back to the rink on Saturday and Sunday mornings. Yeah. But that's fun.
Yeah.
And then on the business side of things with construction and work and whatnot, like I got a passion to build. I love to build. I love what I do. And so it's not who I am. It used to be who I am.
Yeah.
It's not who I am. It's what I do. But I enjoy it, and I think I'm pretty good at it. And so who knows what that opportunity looks like with continued growing in that area of career. And then the men's ministry. So there's all kinds of cool things going on and lots of fun. But I don't know. It comes back to, I think, people. Whether it's investing in people here in this building, serving on the worship team, investing in our small group, investing in the people we come in contact with in our careers or in our small, like I said, small group, or at our school, at events and kids' games and teachers and all of that. So I don't know. There's a lot of things kind of out in front of us that are super fun.
Yeah, there's a book called War of Art, and there's a quote in that. It says, "To yield to resistance deforms the spirit." And I think about you when I think when I read that quote, Matt, because there was, as we've gotten to know each other, over the last handful of years, there was glimpses into a really strong spirit. Things you'd contribute to our planning team for the mission, just ways that you would be empathetic, which my feelers are always up for anybody that's an empath or caring or above and beyond, or just ideas that reflect concern for the individuals that we were serving. It would just pop out from Matt, and I'd be like, oh, I love that. Yeah, I like this Matt guy, and what I'll say is that to yield to resistance deforms our spirit. You said that you're covering symptoms, and when you're covering symptoms, you're hiding. And what you're hiding is the best version of yourself in the moment. And as you continue to do so, continue to seek that best version, you reveal that spirit. And I think I mentioned to you, I think it was post February, just like that. I see a lot more of that now. It's like it feels like you're in a really good place. And what I'll say is thank you for being bold and being brave and seeking healing, not covering the symptoms, and seeking healing through being vulnerable. I've got to know a group of people out in primarily Washington State, and we've become really fast friends. And that's the key theme is vulnerability and truth in our relationship. And what it does is it exposes the best version of ourselves. It exposes our spirit, non-deformed. It's not perfect, and we're saying it's that continue to do so. It's ongoing, but it's a journey worth taking. It's rewarding, and I thank you because it's a reminder to me, as a friend, like to be engaged and to be truthful and to seek healing and to improve myself. Because in an environment with many friends around, it enhances that environment. Because we all, like we talked about, our past, your experiences, your wounds, my wounds. Life is not us and God. The devil gets a say. And it exposes us to things we should not be exposed to. It puts us through experiences that don't seem fair. We ask, if you're God, why do you let this happen? Or how can you let this happen to me, God? But life is full of fires. But I want everyone to hear, like, when you pursue healing, like, you're not just improving yourself. You're stepping up to that mission of husband and father, but it's also friend, because we need friends. We need fellowship. We need guys to be vulnerable with. And it can't just be the guy that's vulnerable in odd situations. We kind of joke about that too sometimes. You're in a line to check out the grocery store. It's like, well, my marriage is like really going downhill. It's like, well, this is not the time to talk about that, but we'll double back on that. But jokingly, and it's provided a lot, and it's released your spirit, and it's been awesome to see. So I look forward to where that's going. If you're comfortable with, I can share any of your social media or any of the missions that you're working on in the show notes. And so we'll definitely share out the Wild at Heart. Again, that's across the country. So if someone says, hey, that is something that sounds really appealing, I do need to create space in my life. I am in a state to receive. It's out there. And there are warmer places in Minnesota. So it is, I imagine, almost year round with the opportunity to find a retreat. We'll look to grow that mission and have those conversations, and I'm excited for that. But anything else that you'd kind of lead out with in the conversation, or anything that we didn't cover that you wanted to get out there?
I think we've kind of touched on what's been burning. I think the acknowledgement, you kind of hit on it there, that like one of the things that gets me going is people discount God's absence in like the despair that is happening globally. And if we acknowledge that God is God, we have to acknowledge that evil is evil and that we live in that. And so I found a lot of repair, like in renunciation, sort of praying and renunciation of decisions that, like, those are influenced by evil. Because if I believe in God, I have to believe in the devil. And so that has been somewhat of an awakening realization for me, which I think gets me down back to, like, I'm not the problem, right? The problem is the brokenness of the world around me. And I can thrive in it, but it takes some work, and it takes some faith, some bold faith to get there. So that's been super rewarding. I think leading out with that is good. One of the things that I kind of did on my own to like build up the courage to get to this point was borrowing courage. And so it would be, I'd be remiss not to give credit to the motivation and the courage and the security, and also like the identity, quote unquote identity, or the ability to relate to the raw man in the consumption of the Wild Courage podcast and the stuff that those guys are doing. When I started listening to that podcast in March, I couldn't turn it off. And it was me driving in my car back and forth in my own head, finding, like, it was a slow build and a slow burn of getting the courage to get to my wife to say, here's what I've been hiding, here's what I've been dealing with. And so those guys have a lot of cool stories, tons of guests with, if you think my story is something to relate with, go listen to some of those guys' stories, because holy smokes, everybody has a story. The world needs to hear it, and there's a lot of healing in just sharing story. So that's been super influential. Community has been super influential. Vulnerability, transparency, humility. Like, I don't know how I get there. I'm still working on it. I don't want to leave this at all with anyone thinking like, oh man, I got to be more like Matt. No, we got to be more like Jesus, because Matt hasn't quite made it yet, at least in his own mind. Yeah. I'm continuing to work on it, man. It's a daily battle, both between my own ears and out in the world. And so if someone listens to this and they're like, oh, if I could just have that guy's life, like, have your own life and work on it, and you can have one somewhat parallel to mine. You don't want mine. You want your own, the one that God's designed for you. And that if we're in a spot of mental health, or a spot of self-degradation, or a spot of insecurity, or these sorts of things, like, know that that's not coming from God, and that isn't who you are. That's the symptom of the current existence and state of which we're in. But we don't have to stay there forever. That's not our destiny. That's not your destiny. That's not the eternal existence of any individual. And that there's hope and healing that's found in vulnerability, that's found in community. And for me, it's taken a long time to work through the psychology of faith, and I still find myself applying psychology to the idea of faith, an unseen God that I can't tangibly feel physically, but I can only feel him in my heart, and I can only feel him working in my soul. Yeah. And for me, it's through music. Some people, it's numbers. It could be movies. It could be individuals, like whatever it is. When that overwhelmedness feeling of warmth and like the goosebumps are throughout your body and you have this euphoric out of body, like, I believe and trust that's the Holy Spirit entering into the moment we're in, and I am freely open to that. And I would encourage anybody, when you find that, lean into that, go back to that, because that's where we're going to find truth. And I think that's where we're going to find capability to do the hard things, to wage the daily battle, and ultimately to take back ground. I think that's another thing that, like, a theme of the current season of life is like, as I have been vulnerable, as I'm finding hope, as I'm finding healing and redemption, he doesn't like it. The devil doesn't like it. And so he's coming back at me in various different forms. But as I stay on the rock, on the steady ground, we take back ground every day from him. That's right. And he doesn't like it. But guess what? We're going back to that well every day to take back more and more ground. And in 10 months, we've taken back some ground. And in the next 10 months or the next 10 years, I'm so hopeful for what the mission God's placed on my heart has in store, and what that means for the people around me. And again, like, I'm not going to control it. That's up to God, but I'll be happy to continue to set up the table, to bring enough chairs, and to facilitate. And I feel like that's maybe where I'm at today. It's like, I'm at peace with that, and I don't have to be in control. But there's hope and healing in this life. We can find it. Yeah,
I love that. I love that. And, before we started the podcast, we talked about everybody's story, and the past, the story that we're living in the present, and the story that we're living in the future. And this just feels like a conversation that we'll just pause here.
Yeah, man.
So I look forward to picking this up, and maybe it's what the next 10 months brings. But I love that too, that if you can see what 10 days can bring, if you can see what 10 months can bring, then it should be really exciting to think what 10 years could bring of taking that ground back. And it's the best way to put it, so we'll leave it off there. And as always, thank you for joining me and Matt today and listening into the Stronghold Podcast.